Dale Vince, the co-entrepreneur, shocked the BBC's Faisal Islam last night after not opposing the drilling of North Sea oil.
You might be losing this argument on Jackdaw, at least as regards to gas.
Yeah, well, I'm not convinced, actually, and it will still have to gain planning consent, as you mentioned at the top of the show. But look, I have a different position, perhaps, than the one you expect me to have. There's a way that we can make sense of this North Sea puzzle. We can actually bring our bills down, which we can't at the moment unless we do this one thing, which is price control the North Sea. At the moment, the global market sets the price, and it doesn't matter how much we make here, we pay the global price. If we price control it like we have our retail energy sector, we can actually save money, and that makes more sense of the North Sea, and it would make more sense of Jackdaw and Rosebank.
Oh, right. So, I mean, have you changed your position? Because it did appear that you were against it fairly recently, entirely on the reopening of oil and gas from your social media.
The way things are and the way things have been, it doesn't make sense. The argument that we can save money by drilling is nonsense. What President Trump just said on your show, by the way, is just the height of stupidity. The North Sea is not one of the biggest finds. It might have been 60 years ago. Now it's got barely anything left. But that's a slight digression. If we price control wholesale energy across the board, like we have retail, we have to do this to reform our energy system. If we do that, we pave the way to make sense of Rosebank and Jackdaw, new drilling, sites that are already licensed, because we can save money. And then this secondary argument that's being made for new drilling, that if we're going to use fossil fuels, we might as well make them here as to bring them from abroad. That makes more sense and comes to the fore. We will use fossil fuels for a number of years to come, and it makes sense to make them here if we can also save money here and create some jobs. I'm up for it.
Well, you have clearly changed your position in the past few. This is interesting. We're getting news here from you, Dale Vince, today, because you were definitely against the expansion of these two fields.
There's something to be said about being practical about the climate crisis. Like, I don't support the idea of banning nuclear energy, for example. I think that's a good temporary alternative until we transition to renewables. Drilling for oil and opening new oil fields that's a different matter altogether. And Vince is an eco warrior, if you like, in favour of drilling. That seems remarkable, especially when only 2 months ago he called it a betrayal. The green energy tycoon, who just months ago said the new North Sea drilling would be a betrayal if given the green light by the government. Vince, in an Instagram post, further explained his position. Labour's manifesto pledge is no new licences. Rosebank and Jackdaw have a licence and they fall into the new drilling category. While I think new licences would be a breach of Labour's manifesto pledge and arguably a betrayal for a lot of people attracted to that pledge, Rosebank and Jackdaw are licensed. They make no sense to me in the current situation, but if we price control our own oil and gas, they start to make some more sense. Even then, bear in mind, they would only be very small contributors to our national need. What this kind of reads, or you could kind of read this as a defence of Labour and saying, well, Labour didn't promise to open, to stop Rosebank and Jackdaw because it was about licences in their manifesto, therefore it's okay. But doesn't that kind of feel like party politics? Vince is supposed to be an independent voice, not a cabinet member with collective responsibility. He has the freedom to criticise whichever policy he pleases instead of towing the party line. It's worth pointing out that in the 2024 general election, Vince backs Labour and not the Greens. If you're thinking that this was purely a tactical choice to stop the Tories winning, then why did Vince specifically back Labour in Bristol when Carla Denyer, who was then co-leader of the Greens, was ahead in the polls? Surely from a tactical perspective, he would have backed Labour nationally, but thrown his weight behind Carla to get more Green voices into Parliament. It's also worth mentioning that Vince is a major Labour donor and has given the party £6 million since 2024, with £5 million of that sum given for the election. Given that the Greens quadrupled their seats at the last election and have become more popular under Zach Polanski, wouldn't it make sense that he would donate to the Greens and to help grow their presence? In a way, it's sort of an appeal that I would make is, hey, you've got a really successful and insurgent Green movement here. Why would you not be backing it? I'm also skeptical of the claim that we can continue drilling to reduce bills. The amount of, at least in the long term, the amount of oil from those licenses are tiny compared to the global market. Without the government nationalizing energy, that's not really a long-term mechanism to control prices. If energy prices were so important to Vince, really the thing he needs to be doing is calling for nationalization. In terms of jobs for Jackdaw, the amount of jobs that will be created for this license is a whopping 27, not 27,000, 27. I have more to say on this, certainly, but Damien, I'll come to you if you don't mind. Is Vince being smart and pragmatic, or is he taking a much more Labour partisan approach?
He's a poster boy for Labour. There's no other way of reading it. I mean, as you said there, he's towing the party line. He's extolling the virtues of the manifesto when he's not in an elected post and is under no obligation to do so whatsoever. And he's backed Labour over the Greens, even in areas where the Greens were set to win. This is a Labour figure. This is a major Labour donor. And he's talking about lowering bills, but you've given every reason for why that's a nonsense argument, quite frankly, because oil is sold under a global market. Without renationalization, you're never going to have control over energy prices, which the energy companies have got no reason whatsoever to pass on to consumers. They're not made to whatsoever. This is production end of the oil market, and the oil regulator only covers the consumer end of that. So it's not touched in any way, shape, or form. But it's the fact that this guy sells himself as this eco tycoon, or the media sells him as this eco tycoon. I don't know if Dale has not noticed or anything, but we have been burnt to a crisp in this country for 2 months now. We are set to have something like our 6th heat wave at the end of this month going into September. We've had drought. We have had wildfires. You've had the Forest of Dean literally smoking from the ground. We've had gorse fires down here in Cornwall. The infrastructure's you've had tracks buckling, for example, under the temperatures. The country is never built for temperatures like this. So the answer can never be to reopen new fossil fuel fields, whether they're licensed already or not, as Dale has put it. But they haven't been drilled yet. They need to be drilled. And you can somehow still say, well, this is sensible environmentalism, because it's backwards. Rosebank and Jackdaw are not going to become climate safe just because they already hold licenses. You know, the atmosphere hasn't taken account of that CO2 yet. There will be more warming as a result of it. But, you know, no extraction should be going on in this day and age, not when we know the seriousness of climate change. We know there's a human element to it, regardless of how much of that you may or may not believe in. It's still happening. And therefore, it's incumbent upon us to try and mitigate that as best we can, even if you don't believe that it's necessarily as man-made as some outlets or some politicians or whoever may make it out to be. But his argument that, you know, price controls can make North Sea production work for British bill payers, as you say, it's for the birds. And without renationalisation, that can never happen. And that's never going to happen under a Labour government. And I don't know how that would affect Dale's business itself if he did suddenly find ecotricity on the renationalisation end of the scale. And as for the jobs, you said the figures yourself. There's 27 jobs there. Well, big deal. That's not going to create a lot, is it? Well, I mean, because so much of this process is automated these days, there's hardly any new workers needed in these things. So to me, it just doesn't smack of genuine belief. It smacks of towing a Labour line to me. And it's very disappointing coming from somebody with Vince's profile that this is the road he's chosen to go down on this, because it's mad.
I think Dale Vince is good on stuff like Palestine, and that is good to see. Like, I appreciate that he was on there, and he's always wearing a keffiyeh. Like, I appreciate that. But I can't see eye to eye with him on this, because I think he's lost sight of the long term, right? I think his focus is on the short term, and not some of the more damaging things that could happen. Now, he was about half an hour before we went live on the show, he was on Novara, being interviewed by Michael, and I wanted to respond to like a few of the things he said. So first of all, he did lay out the argument on exactly how the price control situation would work. It would be done through what's called a contract for difference. which is basically the oil companies, the extractors, enter an agreement with the government, which says it's a contract called a contract for difference, and basically they agree a strike price per barrel or liter or whatever of oil, and if the prices fall below that strike price, the government will top up the difference. They'll make up the difference. But if the prices go above that strike price, then the company will pay the excess, the money above that strike price, to the government. And as far as I can tell, Dale's suggestion is you then use that money to offset consumer prices. And presumably, if we're being, generous with Dale, I think he's saying that you'd invest that into green energy products and green energy. But the thing is a Green New Deal and investment in wind and solar would lower consumer prices as well. It would lower consumer prices and give you all of those things, but it would also reset the economic consensus. I think even if it's successful, there's a lot of criticisms that one could make on a political level. On Novara, Dale Vince was saying when the political stuff was brought up, he was saying that essentially the Tories imposed price caps, and so on energy, so we can do it. And it's like, yeah, but even if those price caps are successful, there's three sort of major problems, or three problems that I would bring up. One, dependence on oil and gas, on fossil fuels itself, is a security issue for Britain right now. We've seen that with the Strait of Hormuz and the way that it's affected prices in this country. Now, we can't fully insulate ourselves from that because global shipping is not decided by the type of energy that we use here in Britain. But the less dependent we are on fossil fuels, surely the more insulated we are from whatever nonsense Donald Trump is up to, or whatever economic restrictions that Russia wants to impose on us through restrictions on liquid natural gas. And that goes for anywhere in the world, not just Russia and the US, but anywhere in the world. Saudi Arabia that wants to put political pressure on us. It's a security issue. But secondly, we have world leading offshore wind farms. Like, we are a world leader in offshore wind farms. It seems silly to make all of this about trying to control prices through oil regulation and through what they call contracts for difference, when we could simply expand our use of offshore wind farms and pump loads more into that. A green industrial revolution. There's so much to be a Green New Deal, green industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it. But the third point is, with the long term, we're probably going to end up with a reform government in the next few years. Let's assume worst case scenario, reform government by about 2029. That's 3 years roughly. And assuming that the Burnham government lasts that long, and it's looking pretty strong at the moment. Now, that is just about long enough to mothball oil fields, so to take away the things that they need to get going again very quickly. And the mothballing of an oil field is not closing it down completely, because closing it down completely takes literal decades. But it would slow them up enough that it wouldn't be so tempting for Reform and their donors, fossil fuel donors, to attempt to reopen those oil fields, because it would take a lot more time and a lot more money, and therefore you reset the incentives for those energy companies into green industrial revolution, and assuming that it would take years to restart, it would stop Reform just removing the price caps if they take power in 2029. The problem with Dale's plan is that it's very easy for Reform to just switch it back to the old system when they take power. We've got to be thinking longer term than that. We've got to be thinking into the future. We've got to be thinking not just about what this government is doing, but how will what this government does affect what the next government will do. I don't know if that made any sense to you, Damien. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I do see where you're coming from. The one question that popped into my head when you started your explanation there, the strike prices, who sets them?
I believe they're agreed between the government and the corporation, but that's, if you're about to say what I think you're going to say.
You know where I'm going with energy prices,
Yes.
and caps there.
Yes.
Yeah, these things with caps is they don't tend to stay capped at a certain level for very long. They tend to move. And the other side of that equation is we got to be, as you say, we got to think about this now. We can't we've got an opportunity at this point to head reform off if we want to, but unfortunately, you've got a government that's taking how much from oil and fossil fuel lobbyists at the moment because they can always be bought. Our politicians are always for sale, and unfortunately, that's, I think, is largely what we're seeing here. You make perfectly valid points when it comes to renewables. We're an island, for heaven's sake. We've got an awful lot of wind. It's all blowing across from Donald Trump, or the United States, if you prefer. But our weather comes from that direction. So we have all that wind. We're an island. I've never understood why we don't have more investment in tidal. Because, I mean, the wind might stop, but the tide never does. As long as we've got a moon, it never will. So, there's all manner of things that we should be investing in that would have more long-termism, that would have more energy security, given what Trump is doing over in the Strait of Hormuz right now, which has really exposed how vulnerable we are to fluctuations in the oil market and the gas market and all other manners of markets as well. I mean, the other one is helium, for example. You can't have a party balloon; it all comes out of Qatar. I don't know if you knew that one, but there you go. It's a byproduct of LNG. But yeah, it's if the shipping's not moving, the products aren't coming out. When our energy infrastructure is so reliant on that, because our politicians have been bought and paid for by oil lobbyists for so long, then nothing ever changes. And nothing's going to change this time either. As much as you've made a perfect case for Andy Burnham, who could be listening right now and thinking, right, I need to not do this. I need to put up bigger windmills. It won't happen. He will not do it. And he will leave that door open for reform. Labour are just as big an enablers of a reform government now as they were when Keir Starmer left. Andy Burnham might be enjoying a bit of a bounce at this moment in time, this little honeymoon period of his. I still find it inexplicable because he's by and large not done anything different. He's just thrown a couple of sweeteners in for this, that, bus fares and the like, which is good. But in the grand scheme of things, that's small potatoes when he's just carrying on with all the big bad stuff the Starmer was bringing in before. And this is a classic example of that.
I hope that Dale wouldn't take this with any sort of disrespect, but I do think that because I think he takes some good positions, but I do think that his thinking in this is very liberal. It's very affected by this sort of liberal belief that you don't deal with underlying conditions, you don't deal with the systemic problems, talk about ownership and incentives and all of these sorts of things, but you just try and just manipulate it from above and just hope that solves the problem. And that's not how it works, because, like you say, the strike price, if it's a government paid by the oil industry negotiating with the oil industry, well, it's very clear who's going to set that. Set those strike prices.
We've seen it all before. We know the cap will rise when it's convenient for the corporations and the government taking their. Thank you very much, Mr. Capitalist. I'll take my cut. Thank you as a donation for staffing. Obviously, we know how they do it, but it'll just happen again, just as it's happening with electricity and gas prices domestically. It's not a system that works. It is a system that exploits us, that we have no choice in, and until people start voting for renationalization for a party that'll actually do it and isn't going to sell out every time like every establishment party always does, the Uniparty, Labour, Conservatives and Reform, because they're not any different. They're full of old Tories, as we know. You've got to choose differently, and it's cutting through. It's a media messaging as well. I mean, again, we come back to the first story, I suppose, in a way, that if we don't have properly regulated media, you're not going to get informed in the way people need to be informed, and the wool will continue to be pulled over people's eyes, and too many people in the country will think Nigel Farage is the coming of the next Messiah, and they're going to vote for him accordingly and lose their pip, and a wall will get built around Dover. I don't know, but that sort of thing.